September 20, 1944, Arras, France. 12:47 p.m. As the morning haze began to lift over the French countryside, Major Charles Carpenter, piloting his Piper L-4 Grasshopper, spotted movement in the fields ahead. A column of German tanks was advancing steadily toward American positions. Carpenter's grip on the control stick tightened. The Grasshopper, a small, fragile observation aircraft, was never intended for combat, but that day it would confront one of the most formidable armored forces in history. In a recent interview with Stars and Stripes, Carpenter had remarked, "Some may think I'm crazy, but if a war is to be fought, it must be done relentlessly, every hour of every day." These words would come to define his audacious approach. The former high school history teacher from Illinois had improvised a bold plan, mounting 6 bazookas to the wing struts of his lightweight plane. Unaware of the danger above them, the crews of the German Panther and Tiger tanks, each weighing between 45 and 57 tons, were about to face an opponent that seemed absurdly outmatched. The Grasshopper weighed just over 1,200 pounds and relied on a 65-horsepower engine, producing less power than the cooling fan of a Tiger tank. Its maximum speed of 85 miles per hour was slower than the rotation of a Panther turret, and its fabric-covered fuselage offered virtually no protection. Yet by the day's end, 2 Panther tanks would be destroyed, leaving their crews shocked at the source of their destruction: an unarmed observation plane modified with infantry weapons. The engagement at Arras marked the final significant armored counteroffensive by Germany in the Lorraine region. General Hasso von Manteuffel had gathered the 5th Panzer Army, which fielded a total of 262 tanks and assault guns. This force included elite units like the 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, as well as the experienced 11th Panzer Division. The Germans' armored formation featured 107 Panthers, 75 Tiger tanks, and approximately 80 assault guns, all intended to stop General Patton's drive toward the German frontier. The 113th Panzer Brigade, newly formed but equipped with some of Germany's most advanced tanks, took part in the morning attack. The Panthers represented the peak of German tank design, each equipped with a high-velocity 75mm gun capable of destroying any Allied vehicle at over 2 kilometers. Frontal armor was sloped at 55 degrees and measured 80mm thick, deflecting most conventional Allied anti-tank weapons. Yet, the tanks had a significant blind spot. The top armor ranged 55mm on Tigers. German engineers had focused on protecting against threats at ground level, never anticipating an attack from above, particularly from a small reconnaissance plane armed with bazookas. Throughout the war, German military doctrine had consistently treated light observation aircraft, like the L-4 Grasshopper, as non-threatening spotters. They were generally ignored to avoid revealing German positions to Allied artillery. Firing on these planes was discouraged, as it risked exposing the tank unit's locations. Carpenter's intervention would overturn that tactical assumption. According to later analysis by Lieutenant General Walter Kruger, commander of the U.S. 58th Panzer Corps, the newly deployed Panzer Brigades were only moderately effective in combat due to incomplete training and limited equipment. They often lacked adequate reconnaissance, forcing them to advance blindly against prepared American defenses, a vulnerability that Carpenter exploited in an unprecedented fashion. Charles Carpenter was born on August 29, 1912 in rural Illinois, the son of a farming family that suffered devastating losses during the Great Depression. His upbringing, combined with a bold and inventive mindset, would later enable him to transform a simple observation aircraft into one of World War II's most improbable and legendary tank killers. The breakup of his family during childhood forced Charles Carpenter and his brothers and sisters to grow up quickly. After his parents separated, the children frequently labored on nearby farms, contributing whatever income they could to help the household survive. Despite these early hardships, Charles demonstrated remarkable academic ability. His dedication to learning earned him scholarships that allowed him to attend Roosevelt Military Academy in Aledo, Illinois, followed by further studies at Center College in Danville, Kentucky. Before global conflict reshaped his life, Carpenter chose a path in education. He became a high school history teacher at Moline High School, where he met Elder Frittel. The two married in 1940 and soon welcomed a daughter, Carol. Their quiet domestic life, however, would be interrupted by the widening war overseas. When the United States entered World War II in 1942, Carpenter was already 30 years old. Leaving behind his classroom and family, he volunteered for military service. He received a commission as a second lieutenant and completed pilot training, an achievement that placed him on a radically different trajectory. By 1944, his competence and leadership had earned him a promotion to major. He was sent to Europe and initially assigned to the 1st Bombardment Division in France. Shortly afterward, his role shifted. He began flying artillery coordination and reconnaissance missions in direct support of General George S. Patton's 4th Armored Division. Carpenter operated an L-4 Grasshopper, the military version of the Piper L-4 Cub, an aircraft never intended for combat. Its mission was observation, spotting enemy positions and adjusting artillery fire. In addition to these duties, Carpenter also flew as the personal pilot for Major General John S. Wood, the commander of the 4th Armored Division. This position granted him a level of independence unusual for a pilot of such a small aircraft, allowing him to act on his own initiative rather than following strictly scripted flight orders. The particular L-4 assigned to him, bearing serial number 4330,426, soon gained an unmistakable identity. Carpenter named it Rosie the Rocketer, a deliberate nod to the iconic wartime symbol Rosie the Riveter, an ironic title for a fragile liaison plane that would soon defy its original purpose. In the summer of 1944, Carpenter wrote candidly to his wife. He described taking increasing risks in the air and marveled at his continued survival. In one recent mission, enemy fire punched a hole clean through his wing, and during another flight he clipped a church steeple with his landing gear. Under the circumstances, he wrote, the damage seemed minor compared to what might have occurred. Carpenter's approach to combat was aggressive and uncompromising. In an interview with Associated Press journalist Wes Gallagher, he summarized his philosophy plainly. The only way to fight a war, in his view, was relentless offense: strike first, strike again, and never stop pressing the attack. The idea of turning the L-4 into an armed aircraft was not entirely new. Earlier, Lieutenants Harley Merrick and Roy Carson had experimented with attaching bazookas to their observation planes, managing to destroy 2 German supply trucks. Carpenter, however, refined the concept far beyond these early trials and pushed it to operational extremes. His first modification involved mounting 2 Monet-owned bazookas along the wing struts. Working closely with ordnance specialists, he devised a system that used reinforced plywood plates to spread both weight and recoil stress across the aircraft's delicate structure. Electrical cables were routed into the cockpit, where toggle switches allowed him to launch rockets one at a time or fire them in rapid succession. Testing quickly revealed limitations. The early Monet-owned rockets, measuring 2.36 inches in diameter, could penetrate roughly 3 inches of armor, enough to disable lightly protected vehicles but inadequate against German tanks. To overcome this, Carpenter escalated the design. He eventually equipped the aircraft with 6 mine bazookas loaded with improved MISX-A3 high-explosive anti-U-tank rockets. These rounds were capable of penetrating nearly 4 inches of armor at a 30-degree impact angle, sufficient to punch through the relatively thin top armor of even the heaviest German tanks. The transformation came at a cost. The full armament added approximately 106 pounds to an aircraft already flying at the edge of its structural limits. The L-4's maximum gross weight was just 1,220 pounds, and with fuel, pilot, and essential equipment accounted for, there was no remaining margin. Carpenter was forced to fly without an observer. The rear seat remained empty simply because the plane could not lift another person. The added weapons dramatically altered the aircraft's handling. The bazookas created significant aerodynamic drag, further reducing the L-4's modest speed and making turns slower and more laborious. What had once been a gentle observation platform now carried the equivalent firepower of multiple infantry anti-tank teams. Hitting a tank from such an aircraft posed enormous challenges. The L-4 lacked any form of gun sight or targeting system. The rockets were fixed in a forward position, meaning accuracy depended entirely on the pilot's ability to aim the whole aircraft. Although the MISIXA-3 rockets had a theoretical range of about 300 yards, practical accuracy dropped sharply beyond 100 yards. To compensate, Carpenter developed a precise and dangerous attack method. From an altitude of roughly 1,500 feet, he would identify his target and begin a spiraling descent. This corkscrew approach confused enemy gunners, making it difficult for them to judge his speed and direction. As he descended to around 300 feet, he would briefly level off to line up his run. Then, committing fully, he pushed the aircraft into a steep dive. The final seconds were the most perilous. At roughly 100 yards, barely 300 feet from the enemy vehicle, Carpenter would activate his switches, launching rockets directly into the tank below. Immediately afterward, he would pull back hard on the controls, forcing the underpowered L-4 to claw its way upward while enemy fire erupted beneath him. Against all expectations, this unlikely combination of ingenuity, nerve, and mechanical improvisation turned one of the war's most fragile aircraft into a lethal weapon and cemented Charles Carpenter's place as one of the most unconventional combat pilots of World War II. From the moment the aircraft tipped into its dive until it finally clawed its way back to safety, the entire strike unfolded in well under half a minute. Yet those fleeting seconds represented the most dangerous phase of the mission. During the attack, the pilot was exposed, slow to climb, and well within range of enemy fire. The Lee Force Continental I-65 engine was never designed to carry rockets. Once the launch rails and ammunition were added, the aircraft paid a steep price in performance. Under normal conditions, it could gain altitude at roughly 450 feet per minute. With a full rocket load, that figure dropped to barely 200. Gaining height became a struggle measured foot by foot, and each additional meter of altitude translated into another second beyond the reach of rifles and machine guns. It also meant precious time to reassess the battlefield and prepare for the next run. The events that would make Charles Carpenter famous began on the morning of September 20, 1944. Dense fog blanketed the area, grounding most Allied aircraft and limiting visibility across the front. On the grounds near Aracourt, Combat Command A of the U.S. 4th Armored Division, led by Colonel Bruce C. Clark, was holding defensive positions. Reports soon arrived indicating that German armored forces were assembling nearby, preparing for a counterattack. Despite the poor weather, Carpenter decided to fly. He trusted that the fog would eventually lift and believed the risk was worth taking. By the time visibility improved around midday, his small observation plane was already in the air, circling above the battlefield in search of movement. Below him, elements of the German 113th Panzer Brigade were advancing. A formation of Panther tanks moved steadily across open terrain, heading directly toward American lines. German crews were trained to watch for enemy armor and anti-tank guns. The slow, fabric-covered aircraft drifting overhead barely registered as a concern. That assumption proved fatal. Carpenter rolled his aircraft into a tight, spiraling descent, an attack pattern he had refined through repeated combat missions. The dive steepened, the plane vibrating as speed increased. At approximately 100 yards, he fired. 6 rockets leapt from their rails and streaked downward toward the lead Panther. One struck the tank's thin top armor, punching through into the fighting compartment. The vehicle shuddered, then stopped. Smoke poured from its hatches. Pulling sharply to the left, Carpenter attempted to climb away as German machine guns opened fire. Tracer rounds ripped past him, and he could hear bullets tearing through the fabric skin of his aircraft. The overloaded engines strained as he fought to gain altitude and escape the kill zone. Less than half an hour later, he was back on the ground, refueling, rearming, and preparing to take off once more. On his second mission, the German tanks were trying to reorganize. The formation had broken apart, vehicles spreading out in an effort to reduce vulnerability. While this made individual targets harder to hit, it also disrupted the momentum of the advance. Carpenter selected another Panther and began his descent. This time, the Germans were alert. Small arms fire filled the air as he dove. The sound of rounds ripping through canvas followed him all the way down, yet his concentration never wavered. Another rocket struck home, penetrating the Panther's 16mm roof armor. The explosion killed the turret crew instantly and knocked the tank out of action. By the afternoon's third sortie, the remaining German armor was pulling back. What had begun as a coordinated advance had dissolved into confusion and retreat. Carpenter had fired a total of 16 rockets that day. 2 Panther tanks were definitively destroyed, and the German counterattack was effectively stopped. The U.S. 4th Armored Division would later credit Carpenter's actions in its official history, noting his decisive contribution in halting the enemy assault. From that day forward, he would be known as Bazooka Charlie. The impact of his attacks extended beyond the immediate battlefield. Prior to our record, German doctrine regarded Allied observation aircraft as little more than nuisances. Engaging them was usually discouraged, as opening fire could reveal positions and draw artillery retaliation and unfavorable exchange. That logic collapsed once reports spread of rocket-armed L-4s attacking tanks from above. German units soon began receiving urgent warnings about American liaison aircraft carrying anti-tank weapons. What had once been ignored now demanded immediate attention. A small, unarmed-looking plane circling overhead was no longer harmless. It could be the opening move of a lethal attack. What had once been considered harmless reconnaissance aircraft had become a serious threat to German armor, forcing commanders to treat them as potential tank killers demanding immediate action. Carpenter quickly noticed this shift in German behavior. In an interview with a Stars and Stripes journalist, he remarked that enemy gunners now fired at him with every sortie, a reaction they had previously reserved for heavier aircraft. They never paid attention to the little cubs before. Bazookas must be giving them some trouble, he observed. The effect of these small planes extended far beyond the tanks actually destroyed. German armor units were compelled to maintain constant vigilance for low-flying aircraft, which disrupted their operational cohesion. Tank formations were forced to scatter whenever L-4 observation planes appeared, interrupting momentum and coordination. Anti-aircraft resources previously focused on defending against fighter bombers were redirected to track these slow, low-altitude targets. Infantry units were ordered to open fire on any L-4 in sight, creating a dense, hazardous environment for the aircraft. This relentless pressure began to take a measurable toll. The 113th Panzer Brigade, which had entered the Battle of Aricourt with 90 tanks, saw only 27 remain operational within a week. While Carpenter was not solely responsible for these losses, his actions contributed to a mounting psychological strain that degraded German combat effectiveness. Tank crews, who had previously felt relatively secure under poor weather conditions, now faced a constant, unpredictable aerial threat. In October 1944, Carpenter honed his tactics, becoming increasingly lethal. By then, he had gained recognition within the Third Army and was granted considerable freedom to strike targets of opportunity. That month alone, he destroyed 4 additional tanks and an armored truck, raising his confirmed total to 6 tanks, including 2 formidable Tiger I heavy tanks. On October 4th, Carpenter encountered a column of German armor attempting a counterattack near Chateau Sala. Despite heavy small arms fire, he managed to hit a Panzer IV directly in its engine compartment. The burning vehicle blocked a narrow passage, immobilizing the column and leaving them exposed to American tank destroyers. A week later, Carpenter faced one of the most dangerous targets in the German arsenal, Tiger tanks supporting an infantry advance near Moncourt Woods. These 57-ton behemoths with up to 100 mm of frontal armor and 88 mm guns were protected not only by their armor but also by surrounding infantry and light anti-aircraft guns. Nevertheless, their roof armor was only 25 mm thick, making them vulnerable to Carpenter's rockets. Exhibiting remarkable daring, he dove through intense tracer fire, launched his rockets at close range, and climbed away just as the first explosions erupted. One Tiger was confirmed destroyed, its ammunition detonating in a massive, fiery explosion. The psychological ramifications were as significant as the physical damage. German crews, already under stress from American material superiority, now had to contend with an enemy they could neither ignore nor predict. Concealment under trees was no longer sufficient. Any L-4 could detect them. The constant hum of a small aircraft engine became a source of anxiety, for any plane could be armed and deadly. Each mission Carpenter flew pushed the limits of both human endurance and machine capability. The L-4 was never designed for combat. Its fuel tanks lacked self-sealing protection, and a single tracer round could reduce the plane to flames. Carpenter was exposed entirely, strapped into a fragile frame of tubing and fabric. In letters home, carefully censored to protect his wife from worry, he hinted at the dangers without full disclosure. After one mission, he wrote only, "Had some excitement today. The plane has a few more holes, but still flies fine," omitting that these punctures represented near misses capable of severing control lines, puncturing fuel tanks, or striking him directly. Ground crews quickly began keeping informal records of the damage to Rosie, the rocketing L-4. After particularly intense sorties, they sometimes tallied dozens of bullet holes that required patching. One crew chief reportedly remarked that Carpenter's aircraft resembled Swiss cheese after a single engagement. Yet against all odds, both pilot and plane survived, continuing to operate under ever-increasing pressure. The combination of physical risk and psychological strain was immense, underscoring the extraordinary courage and skill required for Carpenter's missions. Unlike bomber crews, who operated from altitudes around 20,000 feet and were largely insulated from the immediate dangers of battle, Carpenter confronted combat at dangerously close range. From his vantage point, he could discern individual German soldiers aiming their weapons, and he could read the reactions on tank commanders' faces as the situation unfolded. The intensity of the fighting was deeply personal. Every engagement was immediate and unforgiving. Wes Gallagher, the Associated Press correspondent who spoke with Carpenter on several occasions, described him in Liberty magazine as a legendary figure in a unit where acts of daring were routine. Yet Gallagher also observed a subtle fatigue in Carpenter's eyes, the quiet expression of someone acutely aware of the risks after repeated brushes with death. The bazooka system mounted on Carpenter's L-4 aircraft underwent continuous improvements derived from first-hand combat experience. Early designs, which relied on simple metal brackets to hold the launchers, proved inadequate under the stress of repeated firings. The recoil would loosen the brackets over time. To counter this, plywood backing plates were introduced to distribute the forces more evenly, though they increased the aircraft's already substantial weight. The electrical firing mechanism presented its own set of difficulties. Wiring had to be carefully routed through the wings and into the cockpit while being protected against enemy fire and environmental exposure. Toggle switches were positioned on a basic panel within easy reach of Carpenter's right hand, with each switch controlling a single rocket, allowing him to fire individually or in rapid succession. The system needed to remain functional after prolonged vibrations and extreme maneuvers, yet simple enough to be repaired in the field with minimal tools. Aiming relied entirely on Carpenter's judgment and visual intuition. He devised a personal system of reference markers using points on the engine cowling, cockpit structure, and even scratches on the windscreen to line up shots. Lead angles were meticulously calculated based on his dive speed and trajectory, with adjustments for wind and the unique flight path of the rockets. No backup existed. A miss meant retreating under enemy fire to regroup and attempt another run. The rockets themselves presented additional challenges. The MISIX A3 heat rounds were engineered for static, ground-based targets, not high-speed aerial attacks. Launched from the moving L-4, their accuracy was compromised. The rocket motor burned for only 0.3 seconds, quickly reaching top speed before coasting toward its target. Factors like wind, aircraft motion, and the inherent imprecision of the rockets made a perfect hit far from guaranteed. Carpenter's most notable engagement, the Battle of Aracourt, was far more than a conventional skirmish. It was the largest tank confrontation on the Western Front, where American forces destroyed roughly 200 German tanks and assault guns while sustaining only 25 losses. The German strategy aimed to force the 5th Panzer Army through American defenses to retake Nancy, which would have jeopardized Patton's entire offensive. Carpenter's daring aerial attacks with the L-4 bazooka directly contributed to halting this advance, demonstrating both the potential of innovative tactics and the extreme demands placed on pilots operating at the front lines. The German offensive included some of the country's remaining elite armored formations, although many of these units were under strength and hastily reorganized following the catastrophic losses in Normandy. The 4th Armored Division, commanded by Carpenter, bore the heaviest impact of the German push. Severely outnumbered, the division relied on superior maneuvering, efficient supply lines, and inventive tactics, including Carpenter's specialized tank hunting L-4 aircraft. Coordinated efforts between tank destroyers, artillery units, and Carpenter's reconnaissance and direct assault operations proved pivotal. Carpenter's engagement on September 20th occurred at a critical juncture. The Germans had initially achieved surprise, placing several American positions at risk of being overrun. Carpenter's intervention against the Panther Company's advance delayed the enemy's momentum, giving U.S. forces the breathing room needed to reorganize and deploy reinforcements. The significance of his actions extended beyond immediate battlefield success. Strategically, Carpenter's attacks unsettled German forces. Tank crews who had previously assumed safety from airstrikes now faced a persistent threat from even lightly armed observation planes. The constant requirement to scan for a force, coupled with the need to disperse when they appeared, slowed German operations and disrupted unit cohesion. This tactical pressure had a cascading effect, forcing adjustments in German attack plans and hampering overall coordination. By late 1944, Carpenter had gained widespread recognition within the Third Army. His exploits, widely reported in Stars and Stripes, elevated him to a minor celebrity among American troops. Popular Science highlighted him in its February 1945 issue as Piper Cub Tank Buster in the What's New in Aviation column. Coverage in Liberty magazine, the New York Sun, and other outlets cemented his reputation, making him one of the most widely known pilots in the European theater. However, fame carried new risks. German forces were specifically briefed on the threat posed by rocket-equipped Cubs, and anti-aircraft defenses were reinforced with light artillery and additional machine guns to counter his lethal operations. Each subsequent mission grew increasingly perilous as enemy gunners honed their ability to engage slow, low-flying aircraft. Carpenter himself displayed a strikingly pragmatic view of the danger. When interviewed, he remarked that many thought him reckless, yet he considered perseverance essential. If the war was to be fought, it demanded unwavering commitment around the clock. Confronted with the hazards of his missions, he expressed little concern, attributing his survival to extraordinary fortune. Despite his luck, Carpenter faced repeated life-threatening situations. Beyond the church steeple incident he described in Correspondent's Home, he encountered multiple near disasters. On one occasion, machine gun fire severed a control cable on his L-4, leaving him with only limited pitch control for the return flight. In another instance, shrapnel from a nearby anti-aircraft shell riddled his aircraft without striking vital systems or injuring him. His ground crew, witnessing the frequent damage sustained by his aircraft, implored him to cease these high-risk sorties. Nevertheless, Carpenter persisted, driven by a blend of duty and determination that inspired his peers while simultaneously alarming them. Carpenter's valor was not confined to the air. On at least one recorded occasion, he landed near a battlefield, armed himself with a discarded Munn rifle, and engaged in ground combat. After neutralizing a German column with his rockets, he captured 6 enemy soldiers and escorted them to American lines. In another incident, Carpenter landed adjacent to a disabled Sherman tank under fire, manned its .50 caliber machine gun, and helped repel an infantry attack while the crew conducted emergency repairs. The tank personnel credited him with saving their lives, further amplifying his recognition beyond aviation circles. These combined acts of bravery, airborne assaults, direct combat support, and ground engagements culminated in formal acknowledgement from the highest levels. General Patton personally awarded Carpenter the Silver Star, reportedly remarking that such determination exemplified the type of soldier he sought in his ranks. Carpenter's legacy, both in the air and on the ground, reflected a rare combination of ingenuity, courage, and relentless commitment under fire. Carpenter's wartime record included the Bronze Star with an oak leaf cluster and the Air Medal, also with an oak leaf cluster. His participation in ground combat operations revealed a crucial facet of his personality. He was not satisfied with simply observing or engaging from a distance. Instead, he sought to confront danger directly, employing any weapons available to him. While this approach reflected remarkable bravery, it also indicated a tendency to push himself far beyond conventional limits. Official records credit Carpenter with the destruction of 6 enemy tanks, including 2 formidable Tiger I heavy tanks, in addition to multiple armored vehicles and transport trucks. Eyewitness accounts and informal reports, however, suggest the actual number might have been closer to 14 tanks either destroyed or disabled. This variance likely stems from the difficulty of accurately verifying kills amid the chaos of combat, where multiple units often targeted the same enemy simultaneously. Confirming a single destruction required an extraordinary alignment of circumstances. Weather conditions needed to allow flight jets suppress enemy fighter activity. Targets had to be located and approached without being shot down. Rockets had to strike precisely at vulnerable points, and Carpenter had to survive the return flight. The odds of achieving all these simultaneously were extremely low. Yet, Carpenter managed to succeed repeatedly, demonstrating both skill and daring. The technical challenge he faced was staggering. Imagine attempting to hit a target approximately 20 by 10 feet, the dimensions of a tank's top armor, while flying at 70 miles per hour, firing unguided rockets from a platform that was itself unstable, all under active enemy fire. Artillery observers who witnessed his attacks described them as not only improbable but verging on madness. The destruction of the 2 Tiger I tanks was especially noteworthy. Each of these machines had a production cost of 250,000 Reichsmarks and required highly trained crews, yet they were defeated by rockets launched from a lightweight aircraft worth only $2,500 and flown with basic pilot training. Carpenter's contributions extended beyond tank destruction. Serving as an observation pilot and personal aviator for General Woods, he delivered vital intelligence that shaped operational decisions. His ability to operate at low altitudes and slow speeds, combined with an aggressive reconnaissance approach, allowed him to detect German troop movements often before conventional intelligence sources could. His observations played a critical role in several strategic decisions during the Lorraine campaign. For instance, when German units tried to regroup for counteroffensives, Carpenter's early warnings enabled American forces to preposition artillery and reserves effectively. Detailed reconnaissance of enemy defensive positions also allowed for planned assaults that minimized Allied casualties. The tactical advantage provided by Carpenter's L-4 aircraft had been recognized earlier, but his proactive methods extracted even greater intelligence. By provoking German reactions, drawing fire, forcing unit dispersion, and compelling troops to seek cover, he inadvertently revealed positions and strengths that might otherwise have remained concealed. While less visually dramatic than his anti-tank operations, this intelligence work arguably had an even greater impact, saving American lives and preventing protracted engagements. Carpenter's inventive use of the L-4 also underscores a key aspect of World War II technology. Despite Germany's reputation for sophisticated weaponry, it lacked a simple equivalent to the lightweight, highly adaptable L-4. German forces relied on the Fieseler Fi 156 Storch for similar tasks, a larger, more complex aircraft that was difficult to produce in quantity. In contrast, the American approach, mass-producing simple, reliable equipment, proved to be superior in practicality and adaptability. The L-4 was essentially a civilian design adapted for combat with minimal alterations. Its simplicity was a strength. It was easy to operate, maintain, and repair with basic tools. Meanwhile, German tank engineering emphasized technical sophistication. Tanks like the Panther were optimized for direct armored engagements, equipped with long-range guns capable of destroying Allied tanks while remaining largely impervious to return fire. Yet this specialization created vulnerabilities that American ingenuity could exploit. The bazooka exemplified this pragmatic approach. Quickly developed, mass-produced, and simple to use, it gave infantry units anti-tank capability. Carpenter's modification of an observation plane with 6 bazookas created a unique weapons system, one the German military had neither anticipated nor effectively countered. Even as the war moved into 1945, Carpenter continued flying dangerous missions despite increasing German awareness of his armed reconnaissance aircraft. German command issued instructions specifically for countering these rocket-armed observation planes, including assigning dedicated anti-aircraft resources to track and engage them whenever they appeared. Carpenter's exploits, combining technical improvisation, personal courage and tactical insight exemplify the intersection of innovation and audacity that contributed decisively to Allied operations in the European theater. In December 1944, amid the chaos of the Battle of the Bulge, Carpenter undertook aerial reconnaissance missions under conditions so severe that most aircraft remained grounded. Despite the extreme weather, his observations on German troop movements provided critical intelligence that enabled American commanders to mount an effective response to the sudden offensive. While the poor flying conditions limited his opportunities for direct tank engagement, the value of his intelligence contributions proved indispensable to the operational planning of the USS forces. With the arrival of January 1945, American troops resumed their offensive, pressing toward the Rhine River. Carpenter adapted his combat approach during this period, testing various attack angles and experimenting with different configurations of rockets. He considered increasing his payload, but the L-4's structural limitations, particularly the weight capacity of the wings and struts, prevented further modifications. Carpenter's final confirmed destruction of an armored vehicle occurred in February 1945 when he neutralized a Panzer IV attempting to defend a crucial bridge crossing. Eyewitnesses recounted his daring maneuver, describing how he penetrated a barrage of defensive fire to deliver his rockets at point-blank range. The successful elimination of the tank allowed American engineers to secure the bridge intact, significantly expediting the Allied advance into German territory. By March 1945, Carpenter began experiencing profound fatigue and other health issues that forced him to curtail his flight schedule. Medical evaluations diagnosed him with advanced Hodgkin's disease, a severe malignancy of the lymphatic system, and physicians projected a life expectancy of approximately 2 years. This diagnosis immediately terminated his combat flying, and he was transported back to the United States to receive treatment, leaving behind both his aircraft, Rosie the Rocketer, and a reputation as one of the most unconventional aces of the conflict. The timing, in retrospect, was fortunate, as German anti-aircraft defenses intensified dangerously in the war's closing months. Several Level pilots attempting to replicate Carpenter's tactics were shot down in March and April 1945, underscoring the increasing risks. In 1946, Carpenter was honorably discharged from military service and returned to civilian life as a history teacher. Defying the grim prognosis he had received, he survived far beyond the expected 2 years. Settling in Urbana, Illinois, he resumed family life with his wife, Elder, and their daughter, Carol. Despite his extraordinary wartime achievements, Carpenter rarely discussed his combat experiences, a reticence typical of many veterans but particularly striking given the unusual nature of his service. His daughter later admitted that she had only learned the details of his military record after his death. During summers, Carpenter ran a boys' camp in the Ozarks, emphasizing outdoor skills and personal development. Decades later, former campers remembered him as a firm yet fair instructor, demanding but supportive. None realized they were learning from one of the war's most decorated tank hunters. Over the subsequent years, his health steadily declined due to the lingering effects of Hodgkin's disease, which, contrary to medical expectations, became a chronic condition rather than a rapidly fatal illness. Carpenter continued teaching until shortly before his death on March 22, 1966, at the age of 53. For decades after the war, the fate of Rosie the Rocketer remained uncertain. Like many surplus L-4s, it was assumed to have been scrapped, its significance overlooked. In a remarkable turn of events, aviation historians located the aircraft in October 2017 within the Austrian Aviation Museum in Bad Voslau, Austria. How Rosie ended up there remains unknown, but serial number 4330426 and other identifying marks conclusively confirmed the aircraft's identity. Even more astonishing, the plane still bore signs of combat, including multiple professionally patched bullet holes. The Collings Foundation acquired Rosie in 2019, returning it to the United States for careful restoration. Historians and restoration specialists worked to reconstruct the aircraft as accurately as possible to its wartime configuration. The patches over the bullet damage were intentionally preserved to document the plane's operational history. During the restoration, previously unknown details emerged regarding the modifications Carpenter had implemented, offering new insights into his innovative approach to aerial combat and reinforcing his legacy as a singular figure in military aviation history. Traces of the bazooka mounts remain visible along the L-4's wing struts, bearing silent testimony to the aircraft's unconventional modifications. Close inspection of the repair patches revealed that the plane had endured gunfire from multiple directions, corroborating reports of heavy ground attacks. Some of these patches overlapped, indicating that the aircraft had undergone repeated repairs between missions, highlighting both the intensity of its operational use and the resilience of its makeshift design. Although Major Charles Carpenter's bazooka equipped the 4 never became a formal component of U.S. military armament, the concept he pioneered had a lasting influence on how the armed forces thought about close air support. His work challenged prevailing assumptions by demonstrating that ground troops could benefit from their own dedicated aerial assets rather than relying solely on traditional Air Force priorities. Carpenter's direct interventions on the battlefield lent credibility to the idea that small, adaptable aircraft could play a vital role in supporting frontline units. During the Korean War, a few attempts were made to arm light aircraft, but none replicated Carpenter's level of effectiveness. The underlying principle of his innovation, providing slow, low-flying platforms capable of delivering precise fire support directly to ground forces, found its true realization in the attack helicopters developed in the 1960 seconds. The AH-1 Cobra and later the AH-64 Apache embodied the same tactical philosophy, combining endurance, agility, and targeted firepower to assist troops in combat situations. Modern military doctrine continues to recognize the value of such platforms where controlled, sustained engagement can be more effective than fast, high-altitude bombing runs. Carpenter's inventive approach also helped shape military attitudes toward improvisation and soldier-driven solutions. His field modifications highlighted the practical benefits of bottom-up innovation, prompting the U.S. military to take a more open stance toward enhancements and adaptations devised by personnel in combat situations, solutions that engineers or planners had not foreseen. In 2023, co-authored Bazooka Charlie, The Incredible Story of Major Charles Carpenter and Rosie the Rocketer with aviation writer James P. Busher. Drawing from hundreds of letters and photographs, the book offered an intimate view of Carpenter's personality behind the wartime legend. The correspondence depicted a man of notable courage, tempered by careful judgment, aggressive in action yet reflective in thought. His writings revealed a moral awareness rarely highlighted in combat accounts, showing that he grappled with the human consequences of his actions even as he fulfilled his duties. One letter, penned after destroying a German Tiger tank, expressed sorrow over the necessity of killing. While the enemy were individuals with families and lives of their own, they posed a lethal threat to his comrades, leaving him no choice. This blend of tactical acumen and emotional intelligence set him apart among soldiers of his era. Carol Aki described her father as a fundamentally peaceful man who managed to compartmentalize his wartime experiences, though reintegrating into civilian life after 4 years of conflict proved challenging for both him and his family. A bronze monument at Moline High School, unveiled in 2023, honors Carpenter's service, depicting him alongside a likeness of his bazooka-equipped L-4. The dedication drew veterans, historians, and aviation enthusiasts nationwide, including former students who remembered him as a dedicated teacher who rarely spoke of his military exploits. Meanwhile, the American Heritage Museum in Massachusetts houses the restored Rosie the Rocketer, complete with bullet marks, as part of a comprehensive exhibit detailing Carpenter's wartime contributions. Educational programs by the Experimental Aircraft Association further preserve his legacy, using his story to illustrate how ingenuity and determination can transform limitations into tactical advantages. Military historians continue to analyze Carpenter's methods and their influence on the Lorraine campaign. While his 6 confirmed tank destructions may appear modest in comparison to the scale of World War II's armored battles, the psychological and tactical impact of his actions was disproportionately significant. His achievements raise enduring questions about the nature of battlefield innovation, courage, and the ways in which unconventional strategies can reshape military thinking. Our history teacher, without formal combat training, became one of the war's most unconventional aerial aces remains a compelling study in the alignment of opportunity, skill, and personal initiative. Carpenter's unique position as General Wood's personal pilot afforded him the latitude to experiment, ultimately allowing his daring approach to leave a lasting mark on military aviation. Unlike most L-4 pilots who were generally confined to predefined reconnaissance routes and strict flight schedules, Carpenter enjoyed an unusual degree of freedom in selecting his targets. He could identify opportunities as they arose and decide both the timing and location of his attacks, giving him a tactical flexibility that few others possessed. His background as a history teacher may have played a role in this approach. Educators in history are trained to recognize patterns, analyze sequences of cause and effect, and understand the importance of timing skills Carpenter evidently translated into aerial combat. This analytical mindset allowed him to spot weaknesses in enemy formations that might have gone unnoticed by more conventional pilots. The specific circumstances of the Lorraine campaign also played a crucial role in enabling his distinctive tactics. The terrain, relatively open and devoid of heavy natural obstacles, combined with the concentration of German armored units and the ever-changing front lines, presented opportunities that a sufficiently daring pilot could exploit. Carpenter's personal qualities were equally significant. He possessed an uncommon blend of courage and acceptance of risk, a fatalistic readiness to face potential death repeatedly. His remark about operating 60 minutes an hour, 24 hours a day, reflected a mindset in which he had fully acknowledged the dangers and committed himself to make each action count. A closer look at Carpenter's combat record highlights the exceptional nature of his accomplishments. He was officially credited with destroying 6 tanks, including 2 formidable Tiger I heavy tanks. In addition, he destroyed numerous other armored vehicles and supply trucks. On September 20, 1944 alone, he launched 16 rockets across 3 separate missions. Over the course of approximately 100 combat sorties, not a single L-4 aircraft was lost despite multiple encounters with enemy fire. Each engagement involved rapid, critical decisions, any one of which could have ended in catastrophe. His survival through such missions was statistically extraordinary. Pilots attempting similar aggressive maneuvers usually survived only a handful of sorties. The economic aspect of Carpenter's operations was equally remarkable. The cost of his modified L-4 aircraft totaled under $5,000, yet the tanks he destroyed had production values exceeding 250,000 Reichsmarks each, excluding training costs for crews and transportation to the battlefield. Viewed purely in terms of resources expended versus results achieved, Carpenter's efforts represent one of the most efficient returns on investment in the entire conflict. Despite thorough documentation of his actions, certain elements of his story remain enigmatic. What enabled him to maintain the mental resilience required for repeated high-risk missions? What motivated him to move beyond reconnaissance into direct combat with enemy armor? His personal correspondence offers hints but no full explanation. He often wrote about duty, protecting fellow soldiers, and the desire to see the war end so he could return home. While noble, these reasons alone do not fully account for the extraordinary risks he consistently undertook. Some of the answer may lie in the broader context of his generation. Men who fought in World War II had endured the Great Depression, developing a deep familiarity with hardship and sacrifice. They had witnessed the emergence of fascism and understood it as an existential threat to democratic societies. For someone like Carpenter, who not only studied history but also grasped the larger stakes of the conflict, half measures were never acceptable. Yet perhaps the explanation is simpler. War sometimes demands that ordinary individuals perform extraordinary acts. Carpenter confronted a tangible problem: German armored forces inflicting heavy casualties on American troops, and devised a solution, improbable as it seemed. That the solution involved piloting a lightly built, fabric-covered aircraft directly into the line of enemy fire was simply an acceptable, calculated risk in his view. The influence of Carpenter's approach extended beyond immediate battlefield tactics. His story became emblematic of American ingenuity, The notion that an intelligent, determined individual, equipped with modest tools, could overcome technically superior forces through creativity and persistence. In this sense, Carpenter's legacy is not only military but cultural, representing a broader idea of resourcefulness and daring problem-solving under extreme conditions. The account of Charles "Bazooka Charlie" Carpenter found a particularly receptive audience in post-World War II America, a nation eager to make sense of its victories over seemingly insurmountable adversaries. Carpenter's exploits presented an ideal symbol, the triumph of individual initiative and practical ingenuity over the structured precision of German military engineering. His story also subtly reshaped military attitudes toward innovation. Commanders began to recognize the value of unconventional suggestions from lower-ranking personnel, understanding that those closest to the challenges often generate the most effective solutions. Carpenter's experiences vividly demonstrated this principle. For the aviation community, his actions revealed the untapped potential of light aircraft. The Piper L-4 Grasshopper, originally designed for training and observation, proved capable of combat roles its designers had never anticipated. This revelation influenced post-war aircraft development, encouraging designers to consider broader, more versatile applications for their planes rather than limiting them to a single function. The events surrounding Bazooka Charlie challenged conventional military logic. It seemed impossible for a high school history teacher piloting an unarmed observation plane to destroy heavily armored German tanks. A fragile fabric-covered aircraft with a 65-horsepower engine surviving repeated exposure to enemy fire defied expectations. Attaching 6 bazookas to the wing struts and turning the plane into a combat weapon appeared almost inconceivable. Yet, between September 1944 and February 1945, Carpenter accomplished all of this. By outfitting the L-4 with infantry bazookas, Carpenter transformed a passive reconnaissance aircraft into a lethal, mobile strike platform. Official records credit him with the destruction of 6 tanks, including 2 Tiger I models, a remarkable feat that remains one of the most extraordinary in aviation history. German units in the Lorraine region quickly adapted to the new threat. Aircraft once dismissed as harmless observers became lethal hazards, forcing tank crews who had previously felt relatively secure from American fighter bombers to confront a danger they could not easily neutralize. The tactical shifts within German forces, moving from ignoring L-4 seconds to actively engaging them, underscore the broader strategic impact of Carpenter's innovation. His actions compelled the Wehrmacht to modify anti-aircraft protocols, disperse armored units, and maintain constant vigilance over slow-moving planes. These adjustments disrupted German operations and contributed to the success of US campaigns in the region, demonstrating how one pilot's creativity could ripple across the battlefield. Beyond immediate military outcomes, Carpenter's story exemplifies the power of inventive thinking. Confronted with the challenge of heavily armored German tanks, he engineered a solution using available tools and a bold, uncompromising approach. The bazookas, designed for infantry use, combined with an observation plane, created a weapon system unimagined by either its original designers or military strategists. Today, the restored Rosie the Rocketer, with its battle damage preserved, stands as a tangible reminder of this ingenuity. Each scar on its fuselage represents moments when failure seemed almost certain, yet Carpenter persisted, demonstrating that resourcefulness and courage can defy probability. Charles Carpenter survived the war, passing away in 1966, 19 years beyond the prognosis given by his doctors. He spent the intervening years educating young Americans about history, instilling lessons that transcended the classroom. His students remembered him as exacting but just, unaware that their teacher had once altered the course of aerial combat through daring innovation. For the German crews who encountered him, the revelation that their adversary had been a high school history teacher armed with improvised weaponry would have been astonishing. Yet his story conveys a broader lesson. In times of conflict, creativity, bravery, and determination can overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. The L-4 Grasshopper, which harried German Panthers and Tigers across France, illustrated that even the humblest tools could achieve extraordinary results when combined with ingenuity and courage. Carpenter's legacy serves as a reminder that, with determination and creative problem-solving, individuals can achieve remarkable outcomes, turning the most modest instruments into agents of victory. In the final analysis, Bazooka Charlie's achievements underscore a timeless truth of warfare and human endeavor. Innovation and resolve can turn improbable circumstances into historic triumphs.